Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Better Together at English with Shinrai Sensei. And today we are going to kind of introduce you to the concept of reading to define through context, or reading for context. But it's to teach you how to read, to learn words that you might not know. You don't necessarily want to go grab a dictionary while you're in the middle of Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, or in the middle of, let's say, Lord of the Rings or something like that. And so you instead try to understand the meaning of the word through reading the sentences that it's in and then trying to gather its meaning from there, right? That's all reading for context is. You're trying to define a word by reading the context of the sentence that it's in and understanding that, oh, that's what that is. So I've given some rather simple examples and one that's going to be a little bit more difficult because, well, we'll get into that. But first we have, he went to the apothecary for his medicine. He went to the apothecary for his medicine. Right? Then we have, Rome subjugated their enemies by mercilessly destroying their homes and families. Rome subjugated their enemies by mercilessly destroying their homes and families. My friends like lions or tigers, but I like the Bandersnatch. Alright, so I've got these definitions, or what definitions can be gathered from these sentences, right? I didn't actually look up the real definition because I'm trying to demonstrate that you can get pretty close. You guys can go pull up the dictionary for the two words that are real and then the one that's fictional. But you can look these up and you'll find that I'm not too far off by putting them in the sentences, right? So, he went to the apothecary for his medicine. Rome subjugated their enemies by mercilessly destroying their homes and families. My friends like lions or tigers, but I like the Bandersnatch. And the answers are... An apothecary, if you didn't get it from reading the sentence, is kind of like a pharmacist, right? That's the closest thing you can compare an apothecary to is a pharmacist. But the word hasn't really been relevant in a long time. So what an apothecary was doing when the word was actually more relevant is doing more homeopathic medicines, like grinding up herbs and stuff like that and making poultices and those kinds of things, right? So more what we would consider today as homeopathic medicine is more what an apothecary would be geared towards. The word has kind of fallen out of style, but you still see it here and there. Like you'll see it in the Hunger Games first book is where one such instance where I found the word apothecary. Subjugated, if you couldn't get, is to force submission, usually of an enemy group. So subjugate is to force them to submit to your will, right? And then a Bandersnatch is a fictional animal from Through the Looking Glass, right? So these are definitions. Now the apothecary is also my knowledge of apothecary, not just the definition that I gathered from the sentence, but an apothecary is generally going to be a pharmacist-like role, but usually with homeopathic medicine. And then you have subjugated, forced submission, and then Bandersnatch is obviously the one you really probably couldn't get, other than the fact that it's an animal. You wouldn't have known that it's a fictional animal until you tried to look it up, right? So this is an example of not a good example of reading for context, right? Yet it's in one of my textbooks. I don't know why, but it's in one of my textbooks. This is the example they tried to give. And it's not a good example. It isn't. Because you're trying to give them real world words. So if I was to say, oh, my friends think wolves are cool, and they think that coyotes are cool, but I like the African wild dog. And if you've never heard of an African wild dog, you'll be sitting there going, well, that actually sounds interesting. Can you tell me more? Right? But even still, defining animals, you're not really defining animals when you do this. So reading for context is better for words that are like adjectives, verbs, or nouns, right? You're trying to say, oh yeah, this thing, or hey, this action, or hey, this describing word, right? Those are good for reading for context, but reading for context for like uh African wild dog, well, you can gather that it's probably a dog or a canid of some nature, but it doesn't tell you anything more about it, right? So if my friend says, I like coyotes, and my other friend says, I like wolves, and I say, I like the African wild dog, well, the only thing you can gather from that conversation is that we're all talking about dogs, probably, but even then, I could throw out there, that guy says, I like coyotes, that guy says, I like wolves, and then I just come in out of nowhere and say, well, I like jaguars. And somebody that doesn't know what a jaguar is might think that we're still talking about dogs, right? So when it comes to talking about animals or things like that, something that takes a little bit more to define it than what you can read in a sentence, other than like literally reading the definition of it. Reading for context is either going to be difficult or near impossible for that. Unless, like I said, they literally write in the sentence, a wild dog is this, or a bandersnatch is this. It's really not going to work, right? But reading for context for things like he subjugated the enemy, or the dry ice sublimates at room temperature, things like that. Well, you'll be, and pardon my sniffles, got allergies kind of kicking my sinuses around today. So, but you can't really read for context things about like a specific animal or a specific company. I could say, my friend could say, I like Xbox. My other friend says, I like PlayStation. And I say, well, I like Asus. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, Asus does produce gaming laptops. Does that mean you're a PC guy, or do you just not understand the conversation we're having? That's kind of where that is, right? But just some examples for reading for context. And like I said, this is 2 good examples and then 1 not very good example. And the Bandersnatch is a fictional animal from Through the Looking Glass anyway, so it being a fictional animal makes it being a worse example. Like I said, not every time does a textbook actually have a good answer on these and good examples that they give. So don't think that just because you read it in a textbook, it's a good example or it's the example to follow. Because, like I said, I have a textbook that used the Bandersnatch, and it is so wacky out there, it doesn't fit into what you're actually trying to accomplish by reading for context. Many of the words that I know, I actually learned by reading for context. Or watching. It's not even just reading. You can watch television and learn new words, right? Based on what conversations you hear people on the television having and things like that. But these are some examples, like I said, 2 good examples and 1 bad example. And I will go ahead and cross out for you guys so that you can see that it's a bad example. This is not a good example. So you don't have to worry about knowing what a Bandersnatch is. But that is not a good example. Even though it's in a textbook that I have, it's not a good example. I came up with these 2 because that was the example they wanted me to use. And it is not a good example. So, but I'll let you guys go ahead and take a look at that and think some more about it. If you guys have any questions about anything, please leave it in the comment section below. If you have anything you want me to specifically cover, once again, leave it in the comment section below. Otherwise, that concludes today's lesson. I might do some more of these in the future, but that'll conclude today's lesson on reading for context, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Peace.